They had my son pinned against the porch railing, one arm wrenched behind his back, the other crushing his shoulder, while two fake HOA cops shouted inches from his face, "Give us the Armory code," one of them snapped. Right now, my son yelled that he didn't have it. They didn't care. Their boots scraped across my porch like this was public property. A cheap radio on one vest crackled with made-up call signs, all noise and no authority. Non-compliance, the other muttered, tightening his grip. I stepped out of the cabin. "Let him go," I said. Not loud, not angry, flat, controlled. One of them hesitated for half a heartbeat. The other laughed. "Sir, this is an HOA enforcement action. Interfere, and it gets worse." I noticed the details immediately. The crooked badges, the wrong terminology, the way they said custody instead of detention. They started dragging my son toward the steps. That's when it hit me. They had no idea how many years I'd spent inside federal buildings where mistakes like this ended careers and lives. They thought I was just a stubborn dad, and they definitely didn't know who they were standing in front of. Maribel Cross didn't arrive quietly. She pulled up in a bright cherry-red Mercedes SUV, stepped out with a clipboard tucked under her arm, and told the fake cops to secure the situation like she was ordering furniture moved. "Proceed," she said, eyes never leaving my son. "He's obstructing an HOA security operation." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't look at me. She walked straight onto my porch and announced that the cabin, the shoreline, and everything connected to the Armory were now under HOA oversight due to an emergency compliance review. Maribel Cross was the kind of woman who spoke in memorized phrases and expected the world to obey them. That was her personality, controlled, polished, and utterly convinced paperwork could replace law. Her motive was simple, and stated once, like a business transaction, the HOA needed access to the weapon storage to neutralize a community risk. When I told her this was private land and she had no authority here, she smiled the way people do when they think they've already won. "The HOA supersedes individual ownership during emergencies," she said. "You should know that." She waved a packet of documents at me, bad copies, rush signatures, the kind of filings meant to scare, not stand. She claimed the board approved it, claimed the county was aware, claimed resistance would escalate consequences. This cabin had been in my family for years, long before her HOA ever existed. She didn't care. To Maribel Cross, this wasn't about safety. It was about control, and she'd already decided who was supposed to give it to her. The morning after Maribel Cross arrived, two fake HOA patrol vehicles were parked at the far edge of my driveway, right where Redstone Terrace narrowed into the cul-de-sac. Their bright cherry-red Mercedes SUV and an electric blue Ford Explorer glinted in the morning sun, screaming, "Look at me," among the muted browns and tans of the neighboring homes. Two men, badges crookedly stitched on cheap vests, were snapping pictures of my property, of the vehicles, even of the porch where my son had just stepped out to check the newspaper. Their angles made no sense, but intimidation was the point. "Are you recording again?" one called, voice sharp, trying to sound authoritative. I stepped onto the porch, hands empty, chest calm. "This is private property," I said flatly. "Step back." He laughed. "Private doesn't matter. You're in our compliance zone." I let it slide, watching how they misused terms like custody and enforcement action, how they fumbled with their radios. My son rolled his eyes, muttering, "They're ridiculous." I whispered to him, "Let them think this is just a dad with a cabin." I let subtle hints slip. A casual reference to federal statutes here, a correction to their paperwork there, a few lines they didn't understand, a pause, a tilt of the head, a word misused. It was enough to make them hesitate without realizing why. The HOA men noticed briefly that something was off, but dismissed it. They still didn't know who they were dealing with. Not yet. From the driveway, a neighbor waved cautiously. I nodded. They kept walking. The tension didn't need witnesses. It was already thick in the air. 2 days later, Maribel Cross escalated. A formal notice was hand-delivered threatening hourly fines for unauthorized occupation and failure to comply with emergency security directives. The letter was full of legal jargon, none of it accurate. Non-existent county codes, misquoted HOA policies, false board approvals, all meant to intimidate. My son read it aloud, frowning. "Dad, are they serious?" "They're bluffing," I said quietly, scanning the lot. "Ignore the words." One fake cop took a position at the cabin entrance, clipboard in hand, pretending to measure compliance. The other circled the perimeter, photographing the locked Armory storage near the lake like they had authority to inspect it. Maribel Cross appeared briefly, stepping from her cherry-red Mercedes SUV, eyes fixed on me and her men. The faint click of her heels across the pavement made a rhythm all its own. She didn't say anything, just glanced. One subtle nod and her security unit moved with renewed purpose. They were precise, but they misread every signal. Every misstep, every misuse of custody or enforcement action added tension they couldn't identify. I let subtle hints about my past slip into conversation, a reference to chain of command, a remark about proper federal procedure. They noticed, hesitated, questioned, but could not interpret it. My son watched tense. "Dad, they look serious." I leaned back against the door frame, calm. "Let them stew. They think they're in control. That's the only advantage they have." Sunlight glinted off the SUV, catching their shiny badges and fake authority. The neighborhood felt too quiet. The neighbors pretended not to notice, but I could feel their glances. Every shutter click, every scribble on the clipboard, every misstep in their bluff, it all built tension like dry brush against fire. I stepped back inside, letting them linger in their ignorance. Soon, the stakes would rise. Soon, they would learn who they were really messing with. But for now, the HOA only saw two men in vests, and a family they thought could be intimidated. By the third morning, the tension had escalated beyond petty harassment. My son found another notice taped to the cabin door, this one stamped in bold red letters: "Immediate compliance required. Non-compliance will trigger enforcement action." The language was new, sharper, implying consequences that stretched beyond mere fines. While reading it, he noticed the HOA had taken photos of the Armory lock from unusual angles detailed enough to reveal the layout of the internal storage area. I realized Maribel Cross wasn't bluffing. This was a reconnaissance operation. I called up to him, whispering, "Ignore it. Document everything but don't react. Let them think they've got the advantage." Inside, I started tracing the HOA filings online. Lo and behold, there were alterations in county boundary records, lines shifted, signatures, forged references to emergency easements. The documents suggested the HOA believed they had authority over the entire cabin property, a land grab with a potential low seven-figure value. My son glanced at me, eyes wide. "Dad, they really want the code." "They always do," I said, calm. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." I dropped subtle hints about my experience in federal operations while calmly instructing him on proper recording angles, timing, and verbal responses. The fake cops noticed some of my phrasing, the precise way I spoke about legal procedures. One of them tilted his head, a flicker of uncertainty but still no recognition. They continued their surveillance, snapping photos and pacing, unaware that every action they took was feeding into the narrative. I wanted them to believe this was a father protecting a cabin, not a seasoned federal operative. By late afternoon, HOA escalation forced more serious attention. I had quietly contacted a county clerk familiar with boundary disputes. They confirmed the forged easement filings were invalid. A surveyor was dispatched unofficially to verify property lines. Meanwhile, Maribel Cross's men became increasingly cautious. One whispered into his radio, "He's too precise, too knowledgeable. Could be federal." The other nodded but tried to brush it off, assuming intimidation would still work. Maribel herself appeared briefly near the gate, glaring at me while making a few phone calls. She referenced compliance measures that didn't exist and insisted they could override local ordinances during emergencies. Inside the cabin, I reviewed the HOA's prior emails and board minutes. The pattern was clear. Maribel wanted access to the weapons storage not for safety, but for control. The scale was significant. Financial leverage alone could net a low seven-figure gain if she coerced compliance. The fake cops' hesitation increased as they noticed my son filming my calm interjections and the measured way I cited statutes. One even muttered, "He's not normal." The HOA was starting to sense that they had miscalculated. The slightest misstep on their part would trigger scrutiny. They were tense, cautious, but still acting. Maribel didn't fully grasp the danger, yet her ego blinding her to the stakes. By evening, the HOA had initiated a second patrol attempt, believing sheer persistence would secure the code. They didn't realize their victim was already preparing the legal and procedural framework to turn their aggression back on them. The next morning, the HOA escalated to a final overt attempt. Two fake cops arrived at the driveway, gesturing for my son to step aside. Maribel Cross's SUV gleamed under the morning light, its cherry red paint a stark warning. They called over their radios, repeating the same custody phrases, confident and wrong. My son kept recording every detail, moving carefully, following instructions I had given. Subtle cues in my posture and voice hinted at more authority than they realized. One cop whispered, "Does he know more than us?" The other shrugged but didn't question further. Maribel appeared at the perimeter, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable but urgent. She barked orders, "Bring him out, take control." This was the point of no return. The HOA believed they could extract compliance by force. They had crossed the line of legality multiple times, altered documents, intimidated witnesses, and trespassed. I let them approach, measuring their movements, letting tension build, while providing subtle hints in my words about my experience in federal operations. The fake cops noticed my precise language, the calm, deliberate tone, and the way I referred to legal procedures they barely understood. One of them finally paused, glanced at his partner and muttered, "I think he's not just a dad." The seed of doubt had sprouted, but the full truth remained hidden. Maribel Cross was about to learn too late exactly who she had provoked. As they reached the porch, I watched the moment stretch. Every step they took, every breath they drew, they were stepping deeper into a trap they couldn't see. And in that quiet pause, I knew the next confrontation would be decisive. The HOA's cherry-red Mercedes and the electric blue Explorer were parked at the edge of the driveway, menacing and out of place in the quiet cul-de-sac. Maribel Cross stepped forward, clipboard in hand, eyes blazing. "Bring him out," she barked. "You're under a HOA compliance order." The two fake cops moved toward my son, hands outstretched. He froze, camera rolling, following every instruction I had drilled him on. I stepped onto the porch, calm, precise. One slow exhale, one measured step, and the air shifted. "I suggest you let him go," I said flatly. Maribel's eyes flickered. "Who are you?" That was the moment they realized the mistake. Not fully yet, but doubt rippled through her and her men. I removed my jacket, revealing the badge tucked inside. My rifle rested across my chest, calm, non-threatening, but unmistakable. The fake cops stiffened. "You're bluffing," one muttered. I smiled faintly. "I'm not. And you're about to find out what happens when you misread authority." The cul-de-sac felt electric. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Even from a distance, the tension snapped like a wire. Maribel Cross realized this wasn't a stubborn homeowner. It was a professional, and she had triggered every protocol I knew could neutralize them. I stepped closer, opening a folder in front of them. Copies of the forged HOA filings, altered maps, and emergency easement claims were laid bare. "These documents fraudulent. Your signatures fabricated. Your jurisdiction non-existent," I said, voice low, deliberate. I motioned to my son's recordings and photos. Every movement, every claim, every intimidation attempt captured. Every violation documented for federal authorities. Maribel's face paled. That's impossible." I let it sink. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. The weight of evidence combined with my calm authority did all the work. The fake cops glanced at each other, the first real doubt surfacing. They knew instantly their supposed control was a mirage. "Everything you've done to coerce, intimidate, or trespass will be considered in a federal investigation," I continued, "including impersonation, kidnapping attempts, and coercion." The HOA president's hands trembled slightly over the clipboard. Her facade of control cracked. Maribel Cross opened her mouth, searching for authority she no longer had. Her orders, the enforcement plan, her fake cops, everything collapsed under the evidence in my revealed rank. This isn't," she stammered, voice faltering. The fake cops froze, realizing they were facing real consequences. One dropped the clipboard, the other swallowed hard, stepping back from my son. I signaled calmly, and two deputy marshals stepped out from my team, rifles slung, moving to secure the scene. Every photo, every document, every false claim had already been logged, and now the federal presence made it enforceable. Maribel Cross's eyes darted between her vehicles, the fumbled papers, and my team. Panic overtook her composure. You can't," she yelled, but the words fell flat. The board's attempts to intervene dissolved in the presence of proper authority. My son stayed close, recording everything under my supervision. By the end, the HOA president and her fake enforcement unit were immobilized by law and logic. Their power evaporated instantly. Neighbors who had peeked through blinds now whispered, awed and relieved. The quiet cul-de-sac absorbed the tension, finally letting the calm of real authority settle over Redstone Terrace. And as Maribel Cross realized the depth of her miscalculation, I knew this confrontation would be the lesson she and her HOA would never forget. The driveway was quiet now, except for the low hum of my team securing the area. My son clung to my side, shaking, but unharmed, breath coming in sharp little bursts. I guided him back onto the porch, hands on his shoulders, letting him finally exhale. Neighbors peeked through blinds, their whispers carrying
across the cul-de-sac. One by one, people stepped outside, murmuring apologies, gratitude, relief. "We had no idea it had gotten this far," said a neighbor across the street, shaking her head. For the first time in days, the cabin felt safe. No more lurking surveillance, no more fake authority blocking the driveway, no more whispered threats from the HOA. I let myself lean against the railing, watching the sun glint off the cherry-red Mercedes, now impounded at the edge of the property. Even the electric blue Explorer was immobilized, useless without its driver. The tension slowly drained from the neighborhood. People smiled, spoke openly, asked questions about what had really happened. For them, this was a moment of clarity. The HOA had finally been exposed powerless, and the truth visible for all to see. I kept one hand lightly resting on my son's shoulder, silently reminding him that while the danger had passed, the lesson would stay. Within minutes, federal charges were delivered on-site via my marshals. Maribel Cross faced multiple counts: kidnapping, attempt, coercion, impersonation of law enforcement, and conspiracy. Her fake enforcement unit was charged with armed trespassing, assault, and impersonation, each facing substantial prison terms and restitution orders. As the documents were read aloud, I explained to the gathered neighbors the full weight of the law. The HOA's assets were immediately frozen to cover fines, and the board itself was dissolved by county order, ensuring no further abuse could occur. The county clerk confirmed that all forged documents, altered maps, and falsified easements were null and void. A legal safeguard was established: no property within Redstone Terrace could be reclassified or subjected to emergency compliance without third-party verification and homeowner consent. I ensured my son witnessed the enforcement, showing him that authority is measured real and accountable. The message was clear: false power would never stand when confronted by proper law and evidence. With the HOA neutralized, I walked the driveway, checking the perimeter and the Armory area. The sun reflected off the lake beyond the cabin, calm and quiet, as if nothing had happened. The cherry-red Mercedes sat impounded, the electric blue Explorer locked and unused. Neighbors emerged, some bringing refreshments, others just lingering in awe. They had reclaimed a sense of normalcy and safety. The cul-de-sac was quiet, but no longer tense. The cabin, our property, was ours again, both physically and symbolically. Maribel Cross, the embodiment of control and entitlement, was powerless. Her influence dissolved, her plans thwarted. The HOA's attempt at domination had backfired spectacularly. I returned to the porch with my son, who gave a small, relieved smile. I placed a hand on the railing, looking over the lake at the calm water, at the space we had fought to protect. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. Power only works when people stay quiet, and here, no one will ever stay silent again.
More video to subscribe for my channel. Thanks for watching.